Marvin Harrison Jr. This is an interesting one. I think we could probably take a minute and talk about this as a buy sell because we're kind of different as a group here. I'm going to let Coach go first because I think he's probably the most surprising take here, and let's just go ahead and get the bad air
out. No, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a fine player. I do not think he's ever going to live up to the hype that was built around him. That's where I've been on this. I mean, the fact that the guy was drafted ahead of Neighbors is still kind of mind-blowing to me personally. That's why I sort of feel Marvin Harrison Jr. is a sell for me. Like, I think Marv will be a solid wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team. Like, I don't think he's ever going to live up to the billing of the guy like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or Neighbors or any of those top 10 receiver guys. I just don't think that's who he is. I think he's a wide receiver 2. That's just me personally.
Yeah, and I think people shouldn't overreact to what you're saying. It's tough to hear at first because you're not saying he's a bad player. He's just not necessarily Neighbors or Chase that can truly change the game by himself. I mean, we saw it last year. It never really amounted to too much. But a big question to that is how much is Kyler Murray at fault? And I think there is a play that he has that kind of impacts his ability and how well Marvin Harrison can really play. Would I buy or sell him? I'd probably buy him right now, if I'm being honest. I'm going to at least inquire to see if the manager's down on him and maybe feels kind of like Coach where he's let down a little bit for where you drafted him because he's only 22 years old. Fantastic player out of Ohio State. And I think if you wanted to take a shot, let's say you've got the 103 or 104 and, maybe a mid-second and you're not necessarily comfortable with Ted McMillan being your wide receiver, that's a player I'd probably go get because I think I'd rather have Marvin Harrison than Ted McMillan. But Tyler, what's your thoughts?
I think this is the perfect time to go buy Marv. Listen, Trey McBride just got the highest contract for a tight end for sure in the history of the NFL. So people are down on Marv saying, well, he's now going to be behind McBride just for targets in general. There's nobody else on that team to compete with in terms of targets right now. James Conner, sure. Okay. But I believe in the talent of Marv. If somebody is down on him, I would go yank their arm off in a trade in a heartbeat, especially if they're so down that I'm giving them a late first or something like that. I would do it all day.
Listen, is Kyler Murray to blame a little bit? Maybe, but Malik Neighbors didn't need a quarterback to show how good he was last year. I mean, there's a difference between Malik Neighbors and Marv, in my opinion. Like, there's a significant difference. Again, is Marv a really good player? Possibly, yes. Is he ever going to be what you hoped he was going to be? I don't think so.
I'm not saying you're wrong. My only rebuttal to that is how many targets did Malik Neighbors get? And if you want to throw in BTJ too, comparatively, I would just be curious of that number. I don't know that. But I feel like
while you're talking.
Okay. I feel like Neighbors had a ton of targets, and Brian Thomas Jr., especially as the year and him and Trevor Lawrence got their mind melded together.
I also thought there was, to me,
he was still doing great.
To me, it felt like there was some noticeable pop difference between Neighbors and Harrison. Like when I watched them play, there was the athleticism difference sort of jumped off the screen to me.
I think that was kind of known though too. I mean, I know we talked about it. We had several discussions amongst ourselves, not on recording or anything like that, where we had questions: is Neighbors better than Marv? And I don't know. I think that there was a lot of merit to Neighbors' tape and he having more pop. But Marv's game is kind of more tactile than I think Neighbors necessarily is. Neighbors is just burst and speed and athleticism. Marv is a lot of things off the line of scrimmage and just using his body to separate and make big time catches. I mean, he's certainly a really good player, and Neighbors is a good player too. So we're kind of splitting hairs, but I do agree with Coach in the fact that I don't think he can necessarily attain Neighbors' level, but I don't think that we should necessarily rule him out from being a T. Higgins level wide receiver. And here we are. We just finished talking about T. Higgins, and that's valuable in fantasy. I mean, if he gets to the point where he's averaging 18 points a game and he finishes as wide receiver 16, that's not necessarily game breaking. It's not Neighbors, but it's pretty dang good. But real quick, Tyler, to answer your question, Neighbors had 170 targets. Brian Thomas had 133 targets. and Marv had 116 targets. So Marv clearly the least out of all of them, finished as wide receiver 30. Brian Thomas as wide receiver 4, and Malik Neighbors as wide receiver 6.
Yeah.
So I think if the argument is that Marv is, he's a really good route runner, like that's who he is, right? Maybe a more polished guy, not the athlete that those other guys are. Then those receivers tend to be a little more reliant on better quarterback play. So I do think that that could definitely help him some, for sure.
No, I don't think you're wrong there at all, Coach. Tyler, any last words there before we move on?
No, I think you kind of hit it there. I would go inquire about him, see what he's worth. If the manager's down, throw an offer out there. The worst they can say is no.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the question, Michael, and we appreciate the trade question too. So if you guys are here, be sure to throw things